All right, today we are going to tackle something super useful for getting a handle on chaos, the activity diagram. I'm telling you, if you have ever been totally lost trying to follow a complex workflow, this is for you.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You're trying to explain how something works to a coworker, step by step, but you can just see their eyes start to glaze over. You're losing them. And before you know it, it's just this tangled mess of, if this happens, then do that, but only if this other thing didn't happen. Let's be honest, just using words to explain complex steps with different paths, it's not great. And that's exactly the problem we're going to solve today. So when just talking it out fails, what do? You turn to visuals. Our brains are just wired to understand pictures way faster than a block of text. And that's the whole idea we're going to lean into.
This is where activity diagrams come into play. Seriously, think of them as the perfect fix for that conversational chaos. They're designed to take that jumbled mess of steps and turn it into a super clear map that anybody can look at and understand.
So, what is an activity diagram, really? Well, at its heart, it's basically a story, told visually, of how work gets done. It maps out the entire journey, every single action, every decision, all the way from a clear beginning to a definite end.
Now, you might be thinking, hey, isn't this just a fancy flowchart? And you're close. But activity diagrams are kind of like flowcharts that went to the gym and got superpowers. The biggest difference? They are fantastic at showing when multiple things are happening at the exact same time. That's a level of complexity where your basic flowcharts really start to struggle.
And why should you even care about this? Well, because once you get the hang of it, you can break down even the most ridiculously complicated processes into pieces you can actually manage. You can see where the holdups are, you can explain your ideas without any confusion, and ultimately, you can design way smarter systems.
So, how do we actually build one of these things? It's way simpler than you might think. You only need to know a handful of core shapes, these building blocks. Let's walk through them right now. Okay, first up, every single process has to start somewhere. In an activity diagram, that's the start node. It's just a simple, solid black circle. It's the official kickoff point. No confusion. This is where our story begins. Next, you've got the real meat of the process, the activities. These are the doing parts, right? The actual work. Each one is a specific task, like enter password or process payment. And how do we string all of these tasks together? With arrows. Simple. They're like the director of the whole show, pointing the way and telling you exactly what happens next. But life isn't always a straight line. Sometimes you have to make a choice. That's the decision node, which looks like a diamond. It's basically a fork in the road where the process splits based on a question, like, are the login details correct? Now for that superpower I was talking about, doing things in parallel. The fork is where the magic happens. It's this thick black bar that splits one path into several paths that all run at the same time. It's like true multitasking for your workflow. And of course, if you split paths apart, you've got to have a way to bring them back together again. That's the join. It's another thick bar that acts like a waiting area. It waits for all those parallel tasks to finish up before it lets the process continue down one single path. And finally, every good story has an ending. The end node, which looks like a bullseye, marks the final official completion of the workflow. That's it. Process over. So, when you put it all together, you get this super simple fundamental structure. You've got a start, you've got a series of actions and maybe some decisions, and you've got an end. If you can get a handle on this basic flow, you can map out almost any process you can think of. Okay, theory is great and all, but let's see how this actually works in a real-world scenario that we all know. Let's just trace a simple login process. Okay, so the process starts. First, the user enters their username and password. Then, the system checks those credentials. Now we hit a decision point. Are the details correct? If yes, great, the user logs in. If no, the other path is taken, and we show an error message. See how the diagram makes those two different paths completely clear? Okay, that login example was pretty linear, right? One thing after another. But what happens when a process needs to do like 2 or 3 things all at once? Think about when you buy something online. The second you hit that confirm order button, the system doesn't just do one thing at a time. It kicks off one process to start getting your item ready for shipping, and at the same time, it starts another process to handle your payment. They happen in parallel. And this is just a perfect example of the power of forks and joins. Right after the order placed action, you'd have a fork that splits the path. One path goes to prepare item, the other goes to process payment. Then, a join would wait for both of those to finish before the next step happens, like send confirmation email. It's such a clean and simple way to show what's really happening behind the scenes.
So now that you've seen the pieces and how they fit together in a real example, it's really time to start thinking about how you could use this. But first, let's do a super quick recap. We've seen how an activity diagram can take something confusing and make it crystal clear. You now know the core building blocks, from the start and end nodes to those really powerful forks and joins. You have the tools to map out pretty much any process, even one that's got complicated parallel tasks. So, the next time you find yourself stuck, trying to explain how a complex process works, just remember this. Maybe stop talking and start drawing. Because at the end of the day, the clearest explanation is almost always the one you can actually see.